Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the April 2024 Outdoor Ethics and Conservation Roundtable. So happy to have all the people here and so happy to have the people who watch this on YouTube later on. It's all great to have you all here, and we really appreciate your taking the time to learn a little bit more about outdoor ethics and conservation. Tonight's topic is going to be coral reef restoration and protection at BSA Sea Base, which is going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to start off with our safety moment on snorkeling, how appropriate when we're talking about Sea Base. Then Abigail Clark will talk to us from Sea Base. We'll have a conservation corner with some conservation committee updates from Ted Weiland. Scott Anderson, freshly back from vacation, will give us a FAQ and a discussion on course standards. We'll have a few announcements and then we'll close up and have some time for discussion afterwards. So with that, I think we're ready to get going. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. Scout oath. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Scout law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. 2. Now the outdoor code. As an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, to be careful with fire, to be considerate in the outdoors, to be conservation-minded. Thank you, everybody. And now I'm going to turn her over to Michelle Bierstedt for our safety moment.
So it did seem fitting, and yes, I did do it for Abigail, but I wanted to talk about snorkeling. We are coming into the summer, thinking about camp and camp programs and swimming and snorkeling, kayaking, whatever that water sport is going to be. We always have to make sure that we're being safe about it. So I chose snorkeling specific for tonight. Well, next slide, please. So before that swim or row, we want everyone to have a plan and be on the same page when it comes to aquatic safety in the BSA. The two key training prerequisites are safe swim defense and safety afloat. Remember, these are not learn to swim or learn to paddle courses. They're the BSA's way to conduct a safe and fun aquatics program. Snorkeling safety is its own little brochure within that, and that is the recommended procedure for conducting BSA swimming activities using masks, fins, and snorkels. Since snorkeling is a swimming activity, safe swim defense guides are applicable. Snorkeling safety clarifies and extends safe swim defense concepts to situations encountered during training and open water snorkeling. So we still have our qualified supervision, physical fitness, the safe area, the proper equipment, the lifeguards and lookouts, the buddy system, and discipline are all still those primary focuses. There is a specific file, BSA snorkeling safety, and I put the link into the presentation. So if your camp or your group is going to do some snorkeling this summer, make sure that you review that snorkeling safety so that everybody has a good time, but a safe time. Next slide. I also wanted to put in our Leave No Trace moment with this. Several years ago, Leave No Trace had a hotspot in the Florida Keys, and several of our participants in the level 2 course that was down here this winter, Sea Base staff, gave me a copy of this. So I wanted to share it because I think it's important to know that just because we're on water, we still have those 7 principles of Leave No Trace. Plan ahead and prepare, always and forever. Avoid seafloor impacts, and I know Abigail is going to help us out with that one quite a bit. Dispose of waste properly. Limit use and prevent discharge of pollutants. This would be in our boating activities, our snorkel boats, our sailboats, our motorboats, fishing boats. all have motors on them. So we want to make sure that we're preventing that discharge of pollutants. Leave what you find, respect wildlife, and be considerate of others. So just a little minor change there. And again, that is from Leave No Trace when they did the hotspot in the Keys in 2020. With that, that's your safety moment for tonight. And Paul, can I go right into the introduction?
Please do.
We can. So I had the pleasure of meeting Abigail this in January and February. She was one of our level two instructor participants at the Florida Sea Base, along with other members of the Florida Sea Base staff. We had a fantastic time. Mark Hammer and I were down there and got the pleasure of being the instructors for that course. And I learned so much from Abigail about the Coral Reef Restoration Project and the importance of us to bring the Leave No Trace message, not only to our land activities, but also to our ocean and sea activities and our open water activities. So I had the great pleasure of being able to ask Abigail if she would talk tonight, because I think that information is valuable for all of us, whether we live inland like I do in South Dakota. I have to fly somewhere to be in an ocean, or if you live along the coast and enjoy those ocean activities. I think we need to take some of this stuff into consideration as we're using and recreating on our ocean and open water playgrounds. So with that, I am more than thrilled to introduce Abigail. She is an incredible asset to this group and to BSA and Sea Base, and is really going to help us expand our STEM knowledge with our scouts into this important field and environment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abigail.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that wonderful and so thoughtful introduction. Nearly brought me to tears, so thank you. No, and I'm so truly honored to be here with you this evening. And once again, I just want to thank you, Michelle, for inviting me to speak with you this evening. It is a true pleasure and a true honor to talk about our Coral Reef Restoration Program. I'm just over the moon excited about what we have going on here at the Brinton Environmental Center. And actually, to your point, Michelle, that you just made, something that really has rung true and really kind of resonated with me, having been from the Northeast, is we didn't really have any coral reefs where I grew up in my hometown of Newbury, New Hampshire, central New Hampshire. And so, you know, for scouts to be able to come here to the Florida Keys and learn about corals and to be able to snorkel and dive among Florida's coral reef, it is so life-altering and transformative. And the outdoor ethics and the conservation, it is such an ethos, I don't know, it's a change of heart and mentality that so many scouts and visitors can actually take home with them to their home states and towns. And so what you just shared with me really kind of resonated with me in my own personal experiences. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle. I really appreciate it. So that said, let's talk about corals. I'm so excited. Oh, actually, next. Thank you. Perfect. Fantastic. So I'm actually relatively new to Sea Base, and it has been such an absolute pleasure getting to learn about the BSA and Sea Base and the culture and the everything about it. I absolutely just love, and the more I learn about it, the more I fall deeper in love. And so that said, I am the new STEM director as of January of this year. So while I am new to the BSA, I have been conducting research here in the Florida Keys for a number of years, actually well over a decade. And so in 2013, I started conducting research here in the Florida Keys as a PhD student. Specifically, I was pursuing my PhD in fisheries and aquatic sciences through the University of Florida. And my dissertation work was actually on the Caribbean spiny lobster. And so as I'll share with you how momentarily, I do love marine invertebrates, and they are near and dear to my heart, and certainly corals are among those. Before I moved to Florida, as I mentioned previously, was living in the Northeast, and I earned a master's in zoology at the University of New Hampshire, studying Maine lobster. And then before that, I pursued and ultimately earned my bachelor's in biology at Emmanuel College in Boston. And so that's where I really caught the research bug, so to speak, when I had conducted a research internship at the New England Aquarium on Maine lobsters. And so that said, my research focus is really, as I mentioned, in marine invertebrates, specifically lobsters and corals. And so among my research interests are marine disease ecology of lobsters and corals. And certainly among those are coral reef restoration and microbial ecology. And so most recently, my research has focused on characterization of the microbiomes of corals with active stony coral tissue loss disease. And stony coral tissue loss diseases will come up in my talk later on. But I do love disease ecology, so happy to talk about that as well. So that said, before I became the STEM director, I was an assistant professor of marine science and technology at the College of the Florida Keys in Key West. I was a professor there for 2 years. Before CFK, I was a postdoctoral researcher with the Coral Health and Disease Program at Mote Marine Laboratory, right down the road here in Summerlin Key. I was with Mote Marine Lab for 4 years. And during this time, I also served as an adjunct instructor and a scientist through CFK, Old Dominion University in Virginia, as well as Mote Marine Lab. So that said, to date, I have 13 peer-reviewed publications. Within the last 5 years, I have received 9 grants to fund my research on lobsters and corals. I also serve as a review editor for Frontiers in Marine Science, specifically on the Coral Reef Restoration section of the journal. I also am a reviewer for 4 scientific journals, and over the course of my career, I have delivered close to 50 scientific presentations. And so that said, let's talk about coral reefs. Thank you so much, Paul. Coral reefs are so fascinating, and again, I'm so honored to be able to speak on behalf of Florida's coral reef in particular tonight, because it certainly needs our help in a lot of ways. And I'll go into more detail about why and maybe some things that we can do in our own day-to-day life of helping restore Florida's coral reef. But interestingly, the total area of coral reefs worldwide only equate to about the size of Colorado or Cuba. So really that represents about really less than 1% of the total ocean floor. It's pretty unbelievable that it makes up such a small amount of area in the ocean floor. However, this very small area of the ocean provides myriad benefits. And among those benefits are certainly among our marine species that call the coral reef home. And so that said, coral reefs provide critical nursery habitat for at least 25% of all known marine species, including the Caribbean spiny lobster. Speaking of lobster, coral reefs also are a primary source of protein for over 1 billion people. So really, really important to people. Furthermore, coral reefs provide us with protection. So photographed here on the bottom is actually Hurricane Irma, and I feel like I should knock on wood. So Hurricane Irma unfortunately arrived in 2017. And I just included this as an example of a natural disturbance that is very much a reality for us here in the Florida Keys. And but coral reefs have what I consider a superpower, in that they are able to reduce wave energy by up to 97%. So they have the incredible ability to protect us during these types of natural disturbances. In addition, coral reefs provide jobs. And so I took this photo on Friday. I was diving with my wonderful team in Newfound Harbor, just right next door here to the Brinton Environmental Center. And this is a photo of my team actually collecting measurements in preparation for outplanting corals at Newfound Harbor this month, actually. So that said, It is estimated that in Southeast Florida alone, coral reefs have an economic value of $8.5 billion, and they create over 70,000 full and part-time jobs. So they're really, really important for us economically and certainly ecologically here in Florida. Next. Which brings me to Florida's coral reef. Florida's coral reef is incredible. If you haven't had the chance to come down and see it, come down and visit. Love to show it to you. And so that's Florida's coral reef is the third largest barrier reef in the world. And it spans approximately 350 miles from the Dry Tortugas on up to St. Lucy's Inlet in Martin County, Florida. And so I've included this figure here because it is oh so powerful, and it really truly illustrates just how far our coral reef, Florida's coral reef, has declined over the past several decades. So just to orient you here, so on the left-hand side, we have the absolute percent coral cover, and it's basically showing the percent coral cover of Florida's coral reef over time. And really what I want to point out is that over time, we have unfortunately seen a decline in coral cover of Florida's coral reef. And that's due to several different stressors, and some of which are listed here. So in the 1970s, the percent coral cover was between 50 and 60%. And during that time, the branching species of coral, specifically elkhorn and staghorn, really are what dominated the reef. And unfortunately, white band disease emerged and affected a lot of those branching species and ultimately killed many of those species, which ultimately caused a decline in percent coral cover. So then fast forward to the 1980s, there was pretty much a Caribbean-wide die-off of the long-spine sea urchin, also known as diadema. Now, the long-spine sea urchin is really important, and it's actually a critical piece of the coral restoration puzzle because it's considered a grazer. And a grazer means that it keeps algal biomass down. It likes to eat the algae, much like other urchins, and there's certain species of crab and parrotfish. There are other organisms that like to eat algae. The long-spine sea urchin was among the more important or kind of iconic grazers. So when we lost pretty much that disease, almost nearly decimated the population of long-spine sea urchins in the Caribbean. When that happened, we saw an increase in algal cover, which unfortunately outcompetes coral. And so because of that, we saw a further decline in coral cover. And then we see that among the next several decades, we have several bleaching events. And you may have seen in recent news the mass bleaching event of 2023. And I'll touch more on that here in a moment. But bleaching is an interesting phenomenon, and I apologize if you are already familiar with it. But very briefly, a lot of corals have this really interesting relationship with this microalgae called zooxanthellae. So zooxanthellae actually live within the tissues of coral. And because they live in the tissue of coral, they actually provide the coral with up to 90 or 95% of their nutrients through photosynthesis. Further, the brown zooxanthellae are what give coral its color. In return, the coral provide the zooxanthellae with shelter and protection. During certain stressors, like we saw this past summer with elevated sea surface temperatures over prolonged periods of time, under certain stressors, these coral actually expel those zooxanthellae, and the coral consequently looks white or bleached. And when a coral is in this bleached state, it's not necessarily a death sentence, but if the coral is bleached for any prolonged period of time, it can unfortunately die as as a result of that bleaching. And we saw that in the 1980s and then again in the 1990s, and unfortunately again last summer. So that said, if we were to extend this graph beyond 2002 and 2014, we would see that the stony coral tissue loss disease, unfortunately, further decreased the percent coral cover of Florida's coral reef. Next. Which brings me to a subset of threats to Florida's coral reef. So here, pictured on the left, is a photo of a brain coral that has active stony coral tissue loss disease. And I believe I took this photo when I was conducting research in St. Croix when I was with the Mote Marine Lab. And it's unfortunate in that the stony coral tissue loss disease affects over 30 species of really important reef building corals. And so as we saw previously with the decline, the steady decline of percent coral cover over time, when you then introduce this nasty, fatal, rapid acting disease, it further declined the percent coral tissue cover on Florida's coral reef. So disease is one of the many threats that Florida coral reef is confronted with. In addition to disease is marine debris, right? So here's a picture of trap line that my CFK students and I had removed from Eastern Dry Rocks when we were doing some site maintenance work, including removing marine debris. And this is just one example of countless different types of marine debris. And so marine debris, unfortunately, is among the threats faced by Florida's coral reef. And then circling back to bleaching, up in the upper right-hand corner, this is a figure provided by NOAA. And unfortunately, again, this is kind of summarizing or capturing last summer's bleaching event, where it was really, truly unprecedented. And it was unprecedented in that the corals were exposed to extremely hot temperatures for an extremely long period of time. And unfortunately, because of that, so many of the outplanted corals and so many of the wild corals died as a result, but not all of them. So don't lose hope. Always trying to find the silver lining, and there certainly is one despite this unprecedented coral bleaching event that took place last summer. Next, which brings me to my silver lining. Mission Iconic Reefs. Mission Iconic Reefs is an initiative that has been created by NOAA, by the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, as well as the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. And it is this 20-year-long initiative to restore 7 iconic reefs along Florida's coral reef. And I'm so truly excited and honored to share that that Sea Base is among the Mission Iconic Reefs partners. So we are actively working with Mote Marine Lab, with Coral Restoration Foundation, with Reef Renewal, other partners, including NOAA and the Sanctuary. Everyone is coming together in an unprecedented fashion to restore these 7 iconic reefs. So currently, the percent coral tissue cover of Florida's coral reef is around 2%, which is stark contrast from what I showed you previously back in the 1970s, right, between 50 and 60%. So through Mission Iconic Reefs, we're all working collectively to restore Florida's coral reef from the current state of 2% up to 25%. So we're doing so very strategically, very creatively, and we're very excited to be a part of this restoration effort. So that said, right next door to Newfound Harbor and Looe Key Reef, which again are the 2 reefs that Sea Base is actively restoring along with our partners. So right next door to these 2 sites is the Brinton Environmental Center. Next. Ta-da! Welcome. So the Brinton Environmental Center, which is actually where I'm calling in from this evening, it is lovely, and you should come visit us. And so that's the Brinton Environmental Center is based in Summerlin Key, Florida, right here in the lower Florida Keys. And it's a really special place. We have tons of resources for scouts and for students alike. And among those resources are a STEM classroom, we have Corinthian dive vessels, we have an entire fleet, we've got kayaks, we've got paddle boards, and of course we have our land-based coral nursery. Next. So between the Brinton Environmental Center based here in Summerlin Key and the Florida Sea Base in Islamorada, we collectively serve over 14,000 young men and women across 19 programs each and every year. And what makes these programs so unique, these unique scouting programs, is that they provide these immersive opportunities to youth to be able to develop these fundamental skills in a variety of aquatic activities, including kayaking, fishing, snorkeling, like Michelle mentioned earlier, right? Scuba diving, and of course, coral restoration. So it's such a special place, as I mentioned, and there's nothing like it. And so that said, at the Brinton Environmental Center, we alone serve over 3,000 scouts each year. And of these 3,000 scouts, we serve over 300 scouts, 300 of these scouts participate in the Marine Eco Expedition Program. Now, this program is really exciting in that scouts actually work very closely with STEM staff to gain hands-on experience in STEM and in coral restoration. And so we see her pictured is actually one of the troops, and they're actually working very closely with my STEM staff to siphon tanks. And that's one of the many activities that they do in our land-based nursery. Next. So in 2019, the Brinton Environmental Center introduced its very own land-based coral nursery here in Summerlin Key, Florida. And it's very, very exciting. And the coral nursery really serves two fundamental purposes. The first is it is helping to restore, through this nursery, we're helping to restore Florida's coral reef, because as I mentioned earlier, we have our work cut out for us, right? So we're helping our partners to bring our reef back, right? We have, I always like to say, room for improvement. And so we need a lot of helping hands to restore, conserve, and protect Florida's coral reef. So that's one of our objectives. The second one, of course, is education. Through the land-based nursery, we are able to provide countless opportunities to our scouts and visiting school groups. And it is just, like I said, I keep saying, it's a special, special place. So yes, restoration and education are our two main objectives through our land-based nursery. Next. So for scouts who come here to the Brinton Environmental Center, as I mentioned, they work very closely with our STEM staff, and they do so to develop fundamental skills in coral husbandry. And so among the activities that they do are siphoning tanks, they learn how to test water quality, and they learn how to use microfragmentation to actually propagate corals. Now, microfragmentation is a really, really exciting phenomenon, and it's actually considered an asexual reproductive process that has been integrated into the restoration pipeline. And so we, among other our partners, use microfragmentation to essentially reproduce the corals we have in our facility. And simply put, I don't know if you can see me, but I'm using my hands to illustrate. So microfragmentation really just means that you're taking a big coral and you're cutting into small fragments. And the reason why you do that is when you cut a large coral into smaller fragments, those individual smaller fragments actually then grow up to 40 times faster than if those corals remain that original intact coral. And so when we cut that big coral into smaller fragments, those individual fragments grow much faster and much larger in a shorter period of time, to the point where we can then transplant those corals from our land-based nursery to Florida's coral reef to restore the reef track. And it's really exciting because, again, the scouts and visiting school groups get to actually have their hands in this microfragmentation process. And so the very corals that they are fragmenting in our nursery are actually the very corals that we are then putting on the reef to restore the reef. So they're having a direct hand and impact in the restoration of Florida's coral reef, which is the coolest thing. Next. So that said, in our land-based coral nursery, we have 21 raceways, those big blue tanks shown previously. And within those big blue tanks, we have over 16,000 corals, those little fragments that I previously described. Now, those 16,000 corals represent 9 coral species, including threatened and endangered species. And they are listed here: elkhorn, staghorn, which are those 2 branching species I mentioned previously that once dominated Florida's coral reef. And sadly, many of those succumbed to white band disease early in the 1970s. We also have smooth star, symmetrical brain, knobby brain, mountainous star, boulder star, great star, and muster hill. And so shown here on the right is a fragment, one of those small pieces I described. That's a fragment of mountainous star coral. And that said, we outplant over 4,000 of those fragments that you see here per year on Florida's coral reef. And I will add that the work that we do here is all permitted, is all sanctioned by the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So we are permitted land-based coral nursery, and that is oh so powerful. Next. So that little brown coral that you saw previously, that mountainous star coral, that was one fragment. Here's a picture of 1,000. Some of which you can't see. It's on the other side of the coral head, but these, I can't see my cursor, but the brown, that little fragment that I showed you previously, if you look at this big dead coral head, these little brown spots, those are all individual, there you go, thank you, Paul. Those are individual coral fragments that have been very strategically planted onto this dead coral head. And we do so in a certain, like I said, very strategic, very planned fashion, where these corals are actually, these brown dots are genetically identical. They're essentially clones of each other. And what's really, really cool is when you plant them on the reef in a very strategic fashion, these kind of clusters that you see before you, they actually recognize each other. So as they grow, they recognize each other because, again, they're genetically identical. They're clones of each other. They recognize each other, and they fuse together, and they grow. And together, and you can that over time, these corals will fuse together to the point where we call it reskin the entire mound that you see before you. So it's really, really exciting that we get to be a part of this. And so that said, one of the reasons we were especially excited about the mountainous star coral that you see before you is that these are among the survivors from the bleaching event of 2023. Next. So here's a picture. These are pictures of a subset of those corals up close. So again, you have these individual coral fragments, right? And so what you're seeing are pictures of this cluster of mountainous star coral fragments during and after the bleaching event of 2023. And the panel on the left is of corals that have bleached. And I described bleaching previously, where the zooxanthellae, that brown zooxanthellae, has left and the coral appears white or bleached. The coral is still very much alive. The tissue is there. It's essentially translucent, and you're looking through the translucent tissue at the stark white skeleton beneath it. It's really, really fascinating. And so this was taken back in August when the temperature was over 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Very, very warm and very uncomfortable for corals. Fast forward to February of this year, the temperatures are far cooler. I think it was around 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Those corals are now brown. So they actually obtained the zooxanthellae. They were well enough to welcome back those zooxanthellae into their tissue to the point where they are thriving. And you can actually see some of the coral further fusing together as they work to reskin that entire mound, that previously dead coral head. So it's really, really exciting to us because these are the very corals that the scouts actually had a hand, quite literally, in fragmenting at our land-based coral nursery. And then our STEM staff then outplanted these corals onto Florida's coral reef. And they bleached, which was stressful for them and for us. But then they recovered. They survived. And this is a perfect example of resilience, right? So the coral bleached, but then it recovered. And so that is a really powerful message, and it's a sign of hope. And not only that, but it tells us to that this is a very special genotype or genetic variety of coral that we want to focus our resources and energy in propagating, because we see firsthand that these corals actually survive despite these really uncomfortably warm temperatures. And so that tells us that we should increase production of that particular genotype of coral so that we can put more of these corals out onto the reef because they survive so well and we're so proud of them. So that said, we need more space and we need more corals. And next. Which brings me to our coral restoration program expansion. So as I mentioned before, our work is cut out for us. Florida's coral reef really does need our help. And we're really working very closely with our partners to restore Florida's coral reef to the point where it can be self-sufficient, right? So I mentioned microfragmentation, which is a type of asexual reproduction. The corals can actually reproduce sexually as well. And we want to increase that coral tissue on Florida's coral reef to the point where the corals can grow nice and big and become sexually productive, and they can sustain themselves. And so that said, we need to, at this moment in time, we need to help out Florida's coral reef. We need to continue putting corals onto the reef to increase that coral tissue cover, because like I said, we're still at about 2% and we've got a little ways to go. So we need more corals. And so that said, we are in the process of launching a capital campaign to increase our, really to expand our coral reef restoration program. Specifically, we are going to be building a second coral or land-based coral nursery in at Florida Sea Base in Isla because, like I said, we need more corals, and by building a second land-based coral nursery, this one in Isla up the road a piece, it's not only positioning us geographically to restore another region of Florida's coral reef, but it's also creating that many more immersive opportunities for scouts to get involved and to lend a helping hand to restore Florida's coral reef. And it's so life-altering. And I hear so many testimonials from our existing staff members that say, hey, you know, I came to Sea Base as a scout, I was hooked, I came back, and I love it. And, you know, through our programs and through our coral reef restoration work, we are creating lifelong stewards of our natural resources, of our coral reef ecosystem. And it is so powerful and rewarding. So that said, part of this capital campaign also includes building more staff housing, as well as a STEM classroom at Florida Sea Base and Alamorada. And I'm going to, at the end of my presentation, I'm going to add to the chat the contact information for Mike Johnson, the general manager of Sea Base, who is leading the capital campaign effort. So if you have any questions about the expansion, he would welcome your email. So I'll include that after my presentation. But it's all very exciting, and you know, through this, again, we are going to be able to produce more corals and more experiential learning opportunities for Scouts. Next. Speaking of experiential learning opportunities, I noticed last month that there was some interest in talking about SEEN, and I'm very happy to touch on this very exciting program. And so SEEN stands for Scouting Center of Excellence in Nature and Environment. And I'm proud to report that Sea Base is the first scouting facility to be designated as a SEEN camp. And we have countless examples of SEEN projects here at Sea Base, and this is just a handful of those, including beach cleanups on Big Munson Island, restoration of native trees on the island, trail maintenance, and actually Michelle was a part of that when she was kind enough to be down here at the Brinton Environmental Center a few months ago, leading the Leave No Trace Instructor 2 training, and that was heaps of fun. So we got to participate in some trailblazing, which was a lot of fun and a great way to give back to Munson, as we call it. On the island, we also work to rebuild beach berms. Certainly, marine debris removal is a project that is ongoing, both on the island and in the ocean among our reef. Speaking of reef, Scouts get to participate and complete fish and coral surveys. Other projects not listed include tagging of fish and or sharks. It's just a really, really exciting program. So happy to be a part of it, and like I said, to give back to our environment, our natural resources. Next. And so that said, I would love to take any questions. This is a photo again from last week of my amazing team after we took some measurements in Newfound Harbor in preparation in anticipation of outplanting corals there this month. Some more to come, more photos, no doubt. But I'm happy to take any questions. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And I really, truly hope to see more of you down here at the Brinton Environmental Center. It's a great place.
Dave O'Leary, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. I was down there in the summer of 2020, soon after COVID started, which was a little crazy, but it was when this, you know, I guess they were starting to grow the corals, and but before I think any had been planted. So I will first of all say it's really great that you're here and that this work is progressing, and it's great to see that this is all succeeding. But I'm interested, I guess there's that week-long program down at the Brinton Center that's kind of very science and ecology based. So it sounds like you're going to try to do a similar program up at the main base also. And will that be kind of like a science immersion also, or just kind of like, here's what's going on with coral as like a half day of a bigger, you know, scuba trip or something?
Yeah, great question, David. And thank you so much for your support. And we'd love for you to come back and, you know, post-COVID to check out the corals. Again, we have since expanded quite a bit since 2020. So that said, yeah, so by expanding our Coral Reef Restoration Program into Alamorada and building a nursery there, yes, we hope to also, we plan to also offer that many more opportunities in STEM, much like we do here at the Brinton Environmental Center. And another great thing that we do actually in Alamorada is currently we work very closely with our partners at the Coral Restoration Foundation. So Scouts who are interested in becoming dive certified, they actually do so at Sea Base in Alamorada. And part of that experience is actually working closely with the Coral Restoration Foundation to outplant some of their corals and do some maintenance of their in-water nurseries. So I talked a lot about land-based nurseries. There's also kind of offshore in-water nurseries, we call those, and a lot of maintenance that needs to go on there, you know, keeping the algal growth down and such. So through the expansion of our coral restoration program, we will also be expanding our STEM activities and efforts. And so a lot of exciting updates and expansions to come for sure. David, thank you so much for asking. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so
So
much.
Another question in the chat. Do the coral bleaching events vary by depth?
Great question. Yes. So that is certainly a component of a factor and a variable in whether or not corals will bleach. And so during this last summer, many of the coral restoration practitioners again came together because, quite frankly, and sometimes quite literally, we were in the same boat. Because many of the corals that were in that offshore nursery I described, where the corals were in these nurseries kind of in the ocean, and they were bleaching. They weren't even planted yet, and they were bleaching on these trees, these PVC trees, we call them. So a lot of the practitioners actually, we call them, evacuate the corals. They removed the corals from those in-water nurseries, brought them onto land for safekeeping. And actually, our coral restoration practitioner partners actually brought several of their corals from their offshore in-water nurseries to our land-based nursery here at the Brinton Environmental Center, because our land-based nursery, the water is actually fed through a well. So all of our corals in our nursery fared fine last summer with the bleaching event. And we thankfully had available raceways to receive the corals that were struggling from our coral restoration practitioner partners. And so those corals, many of those corals that were in our land-based nursery, remained in our nursery for several months until they were able to recover from bleaching, like I showed you with the picture with the during and the after, the white and then the brown corals. So Coral Restoration Foundation actually brought many of their corals to our land-based nursery. We held on to them for several months until they were able to recover from bleaching, and they were actually able to return many of those corals to their offshore nursery in December, because they recovered and they survived the bleaching event, which is so exciting. So that said, that was one approach to dealing with the bleaching event of last summer, where practitioners were actually removing corals from the field away from the thermal stress. Another approach that one of the practitioners used, the reef renewal, is actually they took their offshore nursery and they actually took those nurseries to deeper water where it was cooler. And it worked. It worked. So the corals that were in shallower waters where they were bleaching and they weren't doing well, those reef renewal actually took those corals and brought them to deeper water where they had some kind of refuge from that thermal stress. That said, it was very laborious, and through that event of last summer, a lot of lessons were learned. And I got to say, that's one of the kind of silver linings that we search for, in that all of us came together and figured out what worked last summer, how we're going to approach things differently moving forward, because unfortunately, it's very likely that we will have another bleaching event. And last summer taught us a lot of what to do and what not to do. And so yes, to answer your question, it's a very roundabout way of doing so, but yes, depth is definitely a variable in whether or not corals will bleach or not. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of great concerted efforts underway last summer.
And a couple other comments. 100% endorsed the Marine STEM program. Our scouts loved it, and we're so excited that they filled 2 crews of it 2 years later out of a troop of 25 youth.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. That's great.
And here's a question from Ted. Is there a particular mechanism behind why the cut coral grow at such an expanded rate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure there is. I haven't read that literature. I'm sure the literature exists, but it's very kind of analogous to if you were to get a cut on your hand, right? Your skin has a scrape or a cut, and it's basically kind of stimulating the skin cells to heal quicker. So it's basically almost like if you were to prune a plant, right? It's kind of stimulating the growth of those cells to grow that much faster, to heal itself. So it's kind of a similar comparison there. But in terms of the mechanism, if you include your email address, I'm happy to kind of do some research on my end and see if I can find any peer-reviewed articles that maybe could speak to that.
And then Dave O'Leary helped us out here. He posted the webpage on Brinton Environmental Center and the Coral Reef Restoration. So if you have more questions that Abigail isn't able to answer tonight, you can go ahead and click on that Sea Base link, and that will tell you more about the project. I have to tell you, there is nothing like seeing it in person. I've been to Sea Base now 4 times in the last 2 years, and every time I go to the restoration area, learn something new from looking at it. So it's just an incredible thing to see and to look at.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you, Ted. I will definitely, I've made note of your email address and I'm going to email you. So we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Abigail. That was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And just to add, I'm going to include Mike Johnson's email address in the chat as well, so folks can reach out to him if you have any questions about our capital campaign effort. And again, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here. And please reach out with any questions. And that's it. I'll include my email address as well. And reach out to me anytime. And love to meet all of you in person. And Michelle, you're welcome back anytime. Please come back.
Thanks so much. Hey, Abigail, now Ted gets to talk.
I'm going to be much briefer. Thank you, Abigail. That was a wonderful discussion. And as somebody who spent a little bit of time at Sea Base and has done a little bit of snorkeling, that was great. I can't wait to get back there again. So there's not a ton of updates from the conservation side. We do have that new handbook that's published, and I'll see if my copy paste abilities are sufficiently good to link to that, and there it is. So there's a link to the Scout Shop of the new conservation handbook that's just been published. And hey, what's being featured in there are graphics of the new Distinguished Conservation Service Award medals. Okay, so you asked, we listened, and we're in the process of getting some of these new medals minted and put together. I don't have an exact timeline when those are going to be available, but they are in progress. So that's some good development on that particular portion. The other thing that the committee is really working on right now is updating the ecology syllabus and some of the resources for National Camping School. So if your council is sending any scouts to National Camping School for ecology, they will get a copy of that new conservation handbook. That's going to be a thing that they'll get as part of their packet, along with all the updated information from all the professionals that are on the conservation team. So that's all I've got from our conservation side of the bench.
Thank you, Ted. That's all good news. Appreciate it. Now we're going to move to Scott. And I got to just tell you that Scott has made a tremendous effort to be here today. He's just returned from vacation today. And we really appreciate him getting charts in and being ready.
So I'm a little tired. We'll put it that way. So if I yawn, please forgive me. Dr. Clark, congratulations. Great work going on down there. And I do want to tell everybody here tonight that the Outdoor Ethics and Conservation Committee is partnering with Sea Base as well as the International Committee and working on the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have 3 initiatives that we're currently trying to move forward, one of which I hope I can announce at our next roundtable. And this particular initiative is something that was developed by Sea Base. So there's a lot of good partnerships happening between the great work that they're doing down there. So frequently asked questions. Over the last month, I received quite a lot of inquiries regarding how many can we do a combined Leave No Trace Level 1 instructor course with a skills course? And I'll take the next slide after that. I first would refer everybody to the National Leave No Trace Training Guidelines, and there's a link there to those guidelines, and that governs everything that we do. Now, we do modify those guidelines to meet our standards when we put out our own syllabus, and I'll talk about that as we go through both the Level 1 instructor course and the skills course. Next slide. So, the National Leave No Trace Guidelines in the training agreement, the Boy Scouts of America has a blanket training agreement in place. So if you're doing a Leave No Trace Level 1 instructor course or a Leave No Trace skills course, you do not need to file for a separate training agreement. The agreement that is in place with the Boy Scouts of America will cover that course as long as it is a council-approved course. Next slide. So, what are the standards for each of these courses? And I just want to, before we talk about combining them, let's make sure we understand what is the requirements there. For a level one instructor course, the minimum enrollment is 4 participants. And all participants must be 18 years of age or older. The maximum enrollment now is set at 12 participants. Now, I know in the past, when it was a trainer course, we would often do courses with up to 60 individuals. Now we can only do 12 participants per level 1 instructor course. The lead
Does
instructor,
this include virtual courses?
at this moment, it does.
Okay.
But that is a fair question, and I'll take a note on that and see how that goes. And I'll get back to that. Was Matt?
Yes, that was me.
I thought so. I'll get an answer to that one. The lead instructor has to be a level 2 instructor. The co-instructor can be a level 1 or a level 2 instructor. We think that level 1 instructor should be 18 years of age or older. And additional instructors should be level 1 or level 2 instructors, and age requirement is not really a factor there. So as long as you have your lead and your co over 18 years of age, and that your lead instructor is a level 2 instructor, you're good to go. And then all of our BSA Leave No Trace Level 1 instructor courses must follow the BSA Leave No Trace Level 1 instructor course manual. And my light just tilted, so I'm going to adjust it so I can still see. And there's a link here to that manual if anybody is interested in reading the specific ways these courses get laid out. It's all covered in that manual. Next slide. So, can we do multiple courses? So now that we can't do these big, huge courses, can we do more than one instructor course at a time at the same camp and maybe hold combined classrooms? Absolutely. Multiple courses can be held at the same time, providing you meet the enrollment and instructor standards for each course. So each group of up to 12 participants has to have that lead and co-instructor. The next 12 would have to have the same thing, a different lead and co-instructor. And there'd be no problem whatsoever in having joint sessions to cover big, broad classroom categories. When you get into the skills instruction and when you get into the teaching and educational lessons and presentations, they have to be done by those minimum and maximum standards of 4 to 12. And there's a link there to the Leave No Trace Level 1 instructor course guidelines that dictates what must be taught. And again, Just a reminder, all of those courses have to follow, if they're a BSA authorized course, they have to follow the Leave No Trace Level 1 Instructor Course Manual. Next slide. So now, standards for a skills course. Now, this is different. There is no minimum or maximum enrollment for a skills course. The lead instructor must be a level 1 or level 2 instructor. The co-instructor, we say, must be a level 1 or a level 2 instructor, and then additional instructors could be level 1 or level 2 instructors, and the age is not a factor. Additional instructors are needed to maintain that 6 participant to 1 instructor ratio when enrollment exceeds 12 participants. Now, that's a recommendation, and we'd like to honor that recommendation. And again, there's a link to the actual course guidelines that must be followed for a skills course. Next slide. At this time, there is not a BSA-specific curriculum for the Leave No Trace skills course. And we have requested a specific training code so that if anybody is delivering the skills course, we can enter that into a myscouting.org record as having completed the course. Next slide. Boom, boom. All right, so now when you read those course guidelines, you will see in the instructor segment that it says a qualified co-instructor is required for all Leave No Trace skills courses, and that the co-instructor for a skills course can be a level 1, 2, or 3 instructor, or a person with advanced knowledge and understanding of Leave No Trace principles, skills, and ethics. And the lead instructor should ensure that the instructor is thoroughly understands and has the background to co-instruct. Next slide. So how we interpret that is the burden of correctly providing the syllabus and properly teaching the skills and ethics for a Leave No Trace skills course falls on the lead instructor. But the BSA recommends that the co-instructor also be a level 1 or a level 2 instructor for all council-approved Leave No Trace skills courses. So that's a BSA recommendation. It does differ than what the guidelines are from Leave No Trace, but if you're going to do a BSA using our training agreement, we would like to recommend that you follow our recommendation to have a co-instructor who is a level 1 or a level 2 instructor. Next slide. So, combined courses. And can we do a Leave No Trace skills course and a Leave No Trace level 1 instructor course together? Well, a BSA Leave No Trace level 1 instructor course and a skills course can be held at the same time, providing that the standards for each course are met. So we have a specific curriculum in our manual for the level 1 instructor course. Leave No Trace has the specific guidelines for the delivery of a skills course. It does not matter to us that you had a combined course and offered some of the overall overviews of Leave No Trace, of the center, of where it fits in the scouting movement in a large classroom, and then divided into smaller segments and followed the curriculum that is appropriate for each of those individual courses. When the situation arises that the total number of participants is less than 12, so let's say you had 6 people that wanted to take the level 1 instructor course and 5 that wanted to take the skills course, we would feel comfortable allowing one set of instructors for that entire group, providing that they file 2 separate rosters at the end. So if I'm clear on that, when the situation arises, if it's less than 12 for the 2 courses, we would feel comfortable allowing the 2 concurring courses to commence with 1 set of instructors, providing the number of participants for the level 1 instructor course is equal to 4 or more, with the provision that both courses file separate course rosters. And then whenever the total number of participants is greater than 12, the courses should be separated. with each having its own set of assigned instructors, regardless of the way the number breaks down. So if you have 8 people taking a level 1 instructor course and 8 people taking the skills course, you can combine them for the big sessions, but then they each have to be separate courses after that. Did I cover everything I tried to read right here? And I'm groggy and I'm sorry. I think I got it. Next slide. That's all I have. I'll try to answer your questions. I'm hanging on by a thread. It's about 2:30 in the morning, my time. So if anybody has any questions, I'll stay on after the roundtable is over.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your stamina in being here tonight. So thank you. So some announcements here. I'm trying to see who's on to be the best person here to talk about the conference. Matt, what do you think? See anybody?
That has fallen to me today. So Keith is not feeling well, neither is Kathy. So
Okay.
so just as a reminder, we do have our National Outdoor Ethics and Conservation Conference coming up in September. It is going to be in Utah at Camp Tracy, so the same place where we had it in 2016, if you were able to come there. We've got a lot of great speakers lined up, including Julie Seaton right here, who is the granddaughter of, or great-granddaughter of Ernest Thompson Seton. So, and we've got some pre-course stuff, including a risk management course, some tread lightly offerings, and just all kinds of wonderful stuff. Now, the registration, you can see the link right here. I'm going to put the registration link in the chat as well, so that you can click on that. We've got a great price on it this year. It's $200, and if you register before June 1st, I believe there's also an early bird on that. So get registered as quick as you can. Right now, I believe we've got 22 people registered. We would love to have many, many, many more registered than that. So jump on that if you can. And if you've got any questions, feel free to send us an email at the email address listed down there below, oec-conference@outdoorethics-bsa.org. All right.
There we go.
So here's, yes, thank you. Thanks, Paul. So here's our pre-course offerings. We have a couple sessions of risk management. We have our Council Outdoor Ethics Advocate training that we've had several times. And then we also are offering a Tread Lightly Master Tread Trainer on Wednesday. So if that's something that you're interested in, we would love to have you come and participate in those. The costs are shown on the screen. Now, the $200 that I mentioned, that is the early bird. So before the 1st of June, if you register, it's $200. Afterwards, it's $225, and this includes all of your food and lodging and everything like that. But make sure just to register before August 1st. That way we have a full head count. But we'd love to see everybody there. These conferences are absolutely fantastic. Camp Tracy is a beautiful camp, and in September it will look much like the picture that you see right here in the bottom of your screen. We'll be approaching fall. I think September is the most wonderful time at Camp Tracy. It's very, very pleasant, not terribly cold. It's also not really hot, but lots and lots of great stuff happening at this conference. So please go ahead and get registered, and we'd love to see you there. All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Uh-huh.
Moving from that, level 2 courses. We have level 2 courses scheduled, quite a few this year. And if you are interested or you know someone who is, please pass this information, encourage them to go. This is posted at the link here on the slide. For people who might need financial assistance in attending, we do offer the Dan Howell Scholarship. And information on that is available at this link here. And I get a chance in a little bit, I will post them unless somebody beats me to it, to put the links out there for you. And once again, I'm putting in a call for photos. I just love to put some photos in here. So I got a few photos in here. So here we are, I got a photo from Northern Tier to put in here. So I'd just love you if you could just send your photos to roundtable@outdoorethics-bsa.org. And I forgot to put that on the slide this time. But if you could do that, that would be just great. Appreciate it. Thank you. Also appreciate your feedback, especially we'd like to hear what you like and what you'd like to hear more of in our roundtables. We want these roundtables to be giving you what you're looking for. And if you don't tell us, we don't know what that is. So appreciate your feedback. You can always send an email to roundtable@outdoorethics-bsa.org. There's that address again. You get the idea. You got anything about the roundtables, that's how you can get a hold of us. Now I'd like to move for my my Leopold moment, if you would, for the month. During every week from April to September, there are, on the average, 10 wild plants coming into first bloom. In June, as many as a dozen plants may burst their buds on a single day. No man can heed all those anniversaries. No man can ignore all of them. Another quote from Aldo Leopold in the Sand County Almanac. And that kind of inspired me to think this, this is a great time. If you're out with some youth, just some friends, take time and look at all the different plants that are flowering right now. How many can you identify? What are different ones? Why does that plant look the way it does and grow where it does? Just ask some questions like that. This is be a great time to whip out iNaturalist and look at some of these plants and figure out what's happening with it. Tell me about this plant. Learn some more. The flowers are a great, beautiful way to start paying attention to the different plants. I mean, it's not just this green blur anymore. You've got different flowers to call your attention. So take advantage of that when you're outside. Even if it's just you can do it by yourself. I whip out iNaturalist all the time when I'm walking around. So that's what I have for today. And Michelle, I wanted to ask if, do you have anything to tell us about next month's?
Yep. So next month, I know getting ready for camp, we have a lot of people who write program or are looking for ways to enhance their programs and how to bring outdoor ethics into that. So I've invited our new program director and myself will be presenting on how to include outdoor ethics and leave no trace into a high adventure program. Specifically, we're going to talk about our canoe trek down the Missouri River and how we've readjusted that to provide a leave no trace backcountry experience on the Missouri.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Be here, everybody. And with that, we've come to the end of tonight's roundtable. Thank you so much for joining us.